The Doc's new investment option.
Lead bullion.
Buy your ammunition from the Doc today at sdbullion.com.
When the Doc first envisioned SD Bullion, it consisted of providing consumers a product line of natural and organic medicinal and food options. First came colloidal silver, then came organic GMO-free survival food. Now comes the Doc's most complete medicinal option, Nutrigold, organic, GMO-free, whole food vitamin line. Unlike products formulated using synthetic vitamins and minerals, which suffer from issues related to poor absorption, poor assimilation, non-compliance due to metallic medicinal aftertaste, and tend to produce side effects like nausea when taken on an empty stomach, the Doc's new multivitamin line uses 100% certified organic fruits, herbs, and vegetables. Presenting the Doc's vitamin line, Nutrigold, safe, natural, wholesome, with no metallic taste, and better utilized by the body. Available within the Doc's medicine cabinet. There's a new type of gold in town, Nutrigold. Get yours today, only at sdbullion.com.
This is the Doc and Eric Dubin with the SD Weekly Metals and Markets. Joining us, long time since you've been back with us, the one and only Bill Murphy from Gata. Thanks for joining us again, Bill.
Yeah, good to be here. Thank you.
Well, we thought we were just talking with Eric before the show started. Almost a perfect day to have Bill Murphy on the show with another classic non-farms payroll jobs report takedown here, Bill. We'll let you discuss the market action this morning on the jobs report.
Yeah, well, they did it again. It's back to business as usual, but you know, I mean, it really wasn't that. What gets me is that the dollar barely moved, and all of a sudden gold and silver are forced to collapse. I mean, gold was down $25 at one point, and silver just disappeared there for a while. And it's just the same attack forces that the gold cartel has done for so long, and they've done it again. But I think they're in trouble. All year long, their raids have failed in terms of gaining any traction, and I think they're going to fail again. I'll be surprised, honestly, if we don't make new highs in gold next week. I mean, new highs meaning new highs for the move.
Right, right. Your thoughts, Eric?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's telling when you can look at days like this and see no outside factors that can explain such a sharp downward move. And there were about 8,000 contracts dumped at the 8:30 a.m. hour, plus or minus a minute. So, you're talking about, what is that, a little over 15,000 metric tons of gold. I mean, that's just a huge amount of gold. There's really no incentive for any natural seller to dump that much in a small window because it just crashes the bids and gets a lousy selling price. If somebody really, really wanted to be an honest seller, they'd spread out their selling, and then that's not the pattern we see whenever the cartel moves. And when you compare it to the news backdrop on a timeline basis and any possible explanation, it just doesn't fly. I mean, we had a smackdown on Tuesday morning just past 1 a.m. hour Eastern time, and people were speculating in the media, and the common refrain was, well, it's just because the Russians were at that point in time backing off and tensions were lessening, so everybody was pulling out of gold. But the thing is that there were, 15,000 some odd contracts that were dumped in that time frame too. That was, 15 some odd minute window, and that being also the most illiquid period of a 24-hour cycle too. So it's the same kind of thing where it's so fishy. And on Friday today, what we see speaks to what can probably incontrovertibly be said as a cartel crash. Tuesday morning might have been a little different, a lot of different forces and actions going on. It's not quite as clear, but bottom line is that this kind of stuff happens all the time. And then when you look at non-farm payroll releases over the course of the last decade plus, I mean, it must be 85% or higher when these releases come, that the manipulators in the Treasury Department and in the New York Fed hedge fund room that they're operating now come out and beat the crap out of gold and silver. It's a pattern that's beyond reproach at this point, because this the statistical probability of it not being manipulation is really, really slim. But no one in the media, like Bill always speaks about, pays attention to any of this. The mainstream is just scared to death of it because their bread and butter is paid by, financial services, advertising, and just being part and parcel of the, institutional framework of our government, where if you speak bad about the government, you don't get access to news stories, and therefore you're nobody.
That's it. If you want to be in the club, you got to play. At least they believe this. You have to play their game.
Right. I'd like to get your take, Bill, on Bloomberg actually releasing a story last week covering gold manipulation in the London fix. Obviously, it's a bit late that they're covering it. What's your take and Gata's take with the MSM and Bloomberg finally acknowledging gold manipulation, at least to some extent?
Well, I guess it's progress. We've been talking about the PM fix for years, and the irony is I think probably when the investigation started, actually that has all changed in the past months. Once they realized what was going on and this was going to come out, it actually turned around and went the other way. It's unbelievable. So it's like outside of 6 or 7 days this year or something, or X amount of past many months, the PM fix has been higher. And in the years before, it was unbelievable how much lower it was, and especially in terms of dollar amounts if you added it all up and that kind of thing. But anyways, it's the funny thing is, in a way, we're getting attention on this manipulation issue, but it's really the smallest aspect of the whole thing. I mean, it's in terms of what we're talking about today that's the big deal, and what they've done over the years, and how they crashed gold $600 in the last year and a half. Well, the Dow goes up 3,000, oil up over $22 a barrel, euro making highs. It just makes no sense, and that's the real story. And of course, that's not going to come out till later on, I think, when these markets start to blow up, but eventually it will.
And the German situation as well was tying into this shift in the media, I think, too, because it's just, you cannot deny when a sovereign government begins to start complaining about, hey, we only received 5,000 metric tons of the 40 that you promised to deliver us in 2013, and at the rate you guys are going, the allocation that you promised you'd be sending us won't be here until 2025 or whatever. The story is just so big that it can no longer be hidden underneath the carpet.
Right.
Well, it's comical. I mean, why did they send any? I mean, it's almost worse that they sent 5 tons.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's just pitiful. And we're trying to shake some things up here. If we could get something going in Germany, it hasn't quite worked out yet, where we could get the regulators there and get the big press and some other politicians and make a big stink about the German gold and really what's going on. But that may still work out. But I think the Germans will stay on it. I think we haven't heard the end of that story.
Since you bring that up, you've mentioned a lot of times in your newsletter, and also Chris Powell has made public in dispatches at the Gata website. And by the way, folks, Chris Powell does amazing work. You really should sign up to the dispatch email list over at Gata.org. It's free, and you can keep in touch with what's going on in the gold community on a day-to-day basis, because I don't think anyone works harder than Chris in sending out info. It's really great. But anyway,
I don't know how he does it. But,
it's the managing editor in him. But I think it'd be really helpful and interesting to our audience, Bill, if you talked a little bit about the experience that Gata has had with the Chinese and Asians in general and their sovereign wealth fund, and discussions that you've had with China over the years at Gata. You want to share some of that?
Well, there's a few things that are worth getting into. One is that there's general dispatches that have come out of China, this WikiLeaks kind of stuff, where the Chinese have talked about what Gata's talking about, how the gold market's been manipulated and so on. And I know I've had 3 conference calls with their sovereign wealth fund over the years, and they know everything Gata knows. We've explained it to them. So they know what's going on and are taking advantage of the dips right now to buy how big the Chinese demand is. And then there's the Russians. Andrei Bykov, who's one of the top economic advisors to Putin, has come to 2 of our conferences. And he knows what we know. So we know the Russians know that too. So it's funny that we get the Russians and Chinese to listen to us, and then they go to the people in the West and they don't want to hear about it.
It's definitely interesting, and the Russian situation definitely appears to be escalating as well as we record this Friday afternoon, just ahead of 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Reports are out in the last hour here that Russian troops have stormed the Ukrainian Air Force Base in Crimea. Reuters has confirmed that story, so definitely the situation appears to be quickly escalating. Russia came out today and threatened the U.S. that if the U.S. and EU issues any sort of sanctions at Russia for the situation in Ukraine, that the sanctions are going to come back and I think the quote was they'll boomerang back to the U.S. It's definitely an interesting situation, which unfortunately continues to escalate here.
Yeah, they were even talking about no longer holding dollars and selling treasury bonds. And at this point, I believe there's 16 high net worth Ukrainian oligarchs that have had all of their assets frozen throughout Europe and the United States, and Obama blocked their passports and all that stuff. So to a lower extent, we've already seen actions that are on the lines of sanctions. And you know what's interesting about all of this? The U.S. media is painting Putin almost exclusively as the bad guy, but in reality, this is a much more nuanced situation where, you know, the maiden opposition group in western Ukraine that was responsible for all of the protests over the last few months and basically overthrowing the government, about a third of those folks are really right-wing Nazis with fathers and grandfathers that go back to the original Nazi sympathizers in the Ukraine during the Second World War. And, you know, all of the colored revolution mechanics that the CIA and national democracy institutions that the United States supports has been up and running to try to support that group to stir stuff up. And it's really not that different from what was going on in Syria, where the United States and Saudi Arabia were partnering up to bring all of these radical jihadis from across the Middle East, but in particular from Saudi Arabia and from Iraq and even Afghanistan, to come flowing into Syria and stir things up, and then eventually everything gets destabilized, and then the goal, at least on paper, is that the United States hopes to be able to seed and steer the government that replaces the mess that's created on the ground once everybody basically creates a civil war. And none of this story is out in the media, in the mainstream in the United States. I mean, we've even had Abby Martin over on Russia Today, or RT, protesting, and then one of their anchors as well, Liz Wall, on air saying that she's quitting the network because she just can't stand being associated with all this stuff. And Jay Carney over at the White House, the press secretary, yesterday hosting a press conference, and one of the things he was saying is basically trying to debunk all of the facts that I just outlined as being, you know, conspiracy theory and nothing more. I mean, Paul Craig Roberts and his writings over the last week and a half or so have just been on fire. I mean, people really need to read what he's been putting out there, because it's a fantastic summary about just the facts that I'm outlining. This is not just Putin being an aggressor, or Hillary Clinton comparing him to Adolf Hitler. Unfortunately, this has got a lot to do with how the West has been operating and trying to basically box in the Russians and box in the Chinese and try to maintain the American empire and trying to maintain the status of the United States dollar as well, too. You know, the military card that we can play is the strongest card that we have, and our country is using that in support of the financial services empire of fiat based on the dollar. And it's all interrelated as well with, you know, the stuff that we talk about all the time when it comes to that financial nexus. So that's really the big picture going on here, and you know, it's important to take that into consideration.
I wanted to update the listeners quickly here on the supply situation of physical gold and silver here in the U.S. Demand has been down quite a bit over the last week until the big takedown today on Friday. Premiums are kind of slowly inching down across the board, particularly with the Silver Eagles, really across the supplier, authorized distributor network, as well as the retail markets. This week we saw about a 25-cent an ounce drop in Silver Eagles as the U.S. Mint has increased their production of the weekly allocations the authorized distributors are allowed to purchase. So we saw a little bit of continued decrease in the premiums on Eagles. Other than that, not too much change across the other major mint products, such as the Canadian Maples and the other the generic products like generic rounds and bars and such. Really, the big story in the physical markets this week is the Tulving Company, regarded really over the past couple of decades as one of the big names in the gold and silver business and known for some of the lowest retail prices anywhere. They officially went out of business on Monday with a notice in their store windows. It's kind of been a long, drawn-out saga with Tulving. We don't want to speculate too much, but it appears some sort of hedging gone bad or something back around April last year with the big takedown. Shortly after that, they started receiving tons of Better Business Bureau complaints about not shipping metal, and I think when they had closed, there were upwards of 400 Better Business Bureau complaints that they hadn't shipped the metal. It's kind of a sad story there with Tulving, and we wish the best for all of their previous and current customers that facing the bankruptcy situation with Tulving, that they're able to get their metal, and those who have got their metal are able to keep it throughout the bankruptcy process. Just goes to show you that counterparty risk remains really in all assets, and if you don't hold it in your possession, you don't own it until you hold it. So it's kind of a sad and stark reminder of that. It's kind of been a long time coming, but they officially closed up shop on Monday, I believe it was. So we'll update our listeners if we hear any more as far as any bankruptcy proceedings or anything like that. But it's just a reminder for listeners to do their due diligence really with any purchase, whether it's in the precious metal market or any other big purchase, to do your own due diligence before making big purchases.
Anything new on the Sunshine Mint story?
Yeah, Sunshine Mint remains at about a 3 to 4 week delay. It's been, about 3 or 4 months that they've just haven't been able to keep up with demand. And that, again, as we've chronicled, that kind of coincides with the U.S. Mint allocating the Silver Eagles as well. So, while we don't have any official confirmation from the U.S. Mint, it definitely appears to be, it could be an issue along the lines of acquiring the blanks from the Sunshine Mint rather than the U.S. Mint stamping issues, as the Sunshine Mint continues to have problems meeting demand for their rounds, which is pretty much unheard of until about 6 months ago for the Sunshine Mint to have those kinds of delays. Again, the largest private mint in the U.S. With really a stellar reputation. And they still do have a stellar reputation, but they haven't been able to keep up with demand over the last 3 to 6 months here. But that's really the only major silver mint that doesn't have product available live right now. So that's really the only major thing we're seeing shortages or a shortage situation and a little bit of a delivery delay on is the Sunshine Mint bars and rounds and coins out of the Sunshine Mint. So Bill, wanted to get things back to you here. I know we talked privately before the show that you were looking for big things from gold next week. What's your outlook really over the short term and then the duration of 2014 here?
Well, I think that the biggest thing is that this gold cartel is again not getting any traction with their raids. It's totally different than last year. I mean, look at the amount of what's going on in terms of China. I mean, the people are saying that China is consuming between itself and its citizens like all the supply in the world is coming out of the mines for a year. Where is it coming from? I mean, how can this really be happening unless they've just gotten all kinds of gold from the central banks to meet the supply-demand deficit? So I just think they're hitting the wall. I'll be surprised if gold doesn't become explosive within a month, and certainly moving up much faster than it has in the past. And we could see a real surprise. I know I spoke with Eric Sprott this morning. He's looking for $2,000 gold by the end of the year, and I think he's going to be right. I think that's going to be the surprise. And here we have everyone's bearish. I mean, in the mainstream world, There are no bulls out there at all. And so far, they're way offside. And at some point, they're going to have to shift their outlooks or look really stupid. And, that could bring in a whole new demand component that's no longer there because everyone's expecting to go down. And of course, the Dow and stock market have been going straight up, and everybody's happy there. So this thing can change very quickly.
Okay, well, I think we'll wrap things up there. Always appreciate your time. It's great to have Gata's Bill Murphy back on the show. Thanks for joining us once again, Bill.
Well, thank you, and you guys do great work. I got something in my column today about something you put out, ironically enough.
And before we let you go, if you could let the listeners know how to follow your work, both on Gata and then the private subscription site as well.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, and people can go to Gata.org, and Chris Powell, my colleague, does a great job, and I write something, LaMetropoleCafe.com, I write a commentary every day, and people can sign up for a 2-week free trial and see if it's of interest to them.
Okay, so Gata's Bill Murphy looking for an explosive upside to gold within a month, and I can't really argue with that call, Bill, so hopefully you'll be right here. It'd be nice to finally see some...
I don't embarrass myself for that one, but I think it's in the cards, and it's liable to happen out of nowhere.
And hey, if it ain't next week, it's going to be soon enough anyway.
I sure hope so.
It'll be nice to see some disorderly movement to the upside for a change.
Yep.
And I'll put in a plug, too. I've been a paid-up subscriber to Bill's newsletter for over a decade now, and it's one of the best out there. I highly recommend it. So, folks, check it out. 2-week free trial.
I appreciate that. We're growing old together here.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks, guys. Talk to you again.
All right. Gata's Bill Murphy. For the Doc and Eric Dubin, thanks for tuning in once again to the SD Weekly Metals and Markets.
The Doc's new investment options.
Lead bullion.
Buy your ammunition from the Doc today at sdbullion.com.